The silver serving tray trembled in Luna Ashford's hands as she navigated through the crowded great hall of the Silver Moon Pack House. Around her, wolves of every rank celebrated the approach of the Blood Moon ceremony, their laughter and conversations creating a wall of sound that made her feel even smaller than usual. She kept her eyes down, a survival technique she had perfected over her 22 years of existence, moving between tables like a ghost that nobody wanted to acknowledge. It was safer that way. Being invisible meant fewer opportunities for humiliation, fewer chances for someone to remember that she was the pack house shame, the wolf without a wolf, the pathetic creature who had never shifted even once in her entire life. She had just finished refilling the wine glasses at the head table when she felt it, that familiar, prickling sensation at the back of her neck that meant someone was staring at her with particular intensity. Luna did not need to look up to know who it was. Damian Blackwood, soon to be alpha of the Silver Moon Pack, sat at the center of the elevated platform with his father, the current Alpha Marcus, flanked by the pack's elite warriors and their mates. Damian's presence was like a physical weight in any room, his power radiating outward in waves that made other wolves instinctively bow their heads. Luna had felt that power turned against her more times than she could count. 3 years ago, on her 19th birthday, the mate bond had snapped into place between them with such force that Luna had collapsed right there in the pack house kitchen, where she had been scrubbing floors. She had felt it like a golden thread connecting her heart to his, warm and right and perfect, in a way that made her believe, for approximately 47 seconds, that perhaps her life was about to change for the better. Then she had seen Damian's face when he realized what had happened, watched the horror and disgust ripple across his handsome features as he understood that the moon goddess had bonded him to the pack house failure, and those 47 seconds of hope had shattered into pieces that still cut her every single day. He had rejected her publicly, standing in front of the entire assembled pack during the next full moon gathering. Luna could still hear his words echoing in her mind with perfect clarity, each syllable etched into her memory like scars. I, Damian Blackwood, future alpha of the Silver Moon Pack, reject you. Luna Ashford, as my mate and future Luna, you are powerless, weak, and unworthy to stand beside an alpha. I refuse this bond. The pain had been indescribable, like someone had reached into her chest and torn out her heart while it was still beating. She had survived it, barely, spending 3 days locked in her tiny room in the servants' quarters while her body burned with rejection fever. When she finally emerged, hollow and broken, Damian had already moved on with his life, as though she had never existed at all. If you're enjoying this story so far, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more supernatural romance content. Your support means everything, and helps us bring you more stories like this one. Now, as Luna felt his eyes on her again, she forced herself to remain calm, to keep her hands steady as she poured wine into crystal glasses that cost more than everything she owned combined. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. She had learned to build walls around her heart, to protect the battered remnants of her spirit from further damage. Tomorrow night was the Blood Moon ceremony, an event that occurred only once every 100 years, when the moon turned crimson and the veil between the mortal world and the realm of the moon goddess grew thin. Wolves from packs across the continent had been arriving for days, filling the territory to capacity, all hoping to receive some blessing or sign from the goddess. Herself, Luna had no such hopes. The moon goddess had already made her position clear when she had created a wolf without a wolf, a shifter who could not shift. The evening dragged on with painful slowness. Luna moved through her duties mechanically, clearing plates, refilling drinks, enduring the occasional cruel comment or deliberate trip from pack members who considered tormenting her an acceptable form of entertainment. She had just returned to the kitchen with another load of dishes when Maya, one of the other Omega servants and the closest thing Luna had to a friend, grabbed her arm with enough force to make her stumble. "Did you hear?" Maya whispered urgently, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "They're saying the ceremony tomorrow night is going to be different this time. The elders have been locked in the council chambers all day, going through ancient texts." Apparently, this particular blood-moon alignment hasn't happened in over 1,000 years, and there are prophecies, Luna. Prophecies about the moon goddess choosing a champion. Luna felt a flicker of something in her chest, quickly suppressed. Hope was a luxury she could not afford. The moon goddess will probably choose Damien, she said flatly, scrubbing at a particularly stubborn wine stain on a plate. Or one of the other alphas. That's how these things work. The powerful get more powerful, and the rest of us just survive. Maya's expression softened with sympathy, but before she could respond, the kitchen door slammed open and Beta Thomas strode in, his face set in its usual expression of perpetual irritation. "You," he barked, pointing at Luna. "Alpha Marcus wants to see you in his office. Now." The plate slipped from Luna's fingers, shattering against the stone floor. Being summoned to the Alpha's office was never good news, especially not for someone like her. She followed Beta Thomas through the corridors of the pack house, her mind racing through every possible reason for this summons. Had she made some mistake during dinner service? Had someone complained about her? Was she finally going to be exiled from the pack entirely? Cast out to become a rogue? The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange sense of calm. Perhaps being alone would be better than being surrounded by people who hated her. Alpha Marcus was not alone when she entered his office. Damien stood beside his father's desk, and the resemblance between them was striking. The same dark hair and steel-gray eyes, the same aura of absolute authority. But where Marcus had learned to temper his power with wisdom, earned over decades of leadership, Damien wielded his like a weapon, sharp and unforgiving. Both men looked at Luna as she entered, and she saw something in their expressions that made her instinctively take a step backward. They looked worried, which made no sense at all, because why would two of the most powerful wolves on the continent be worried? About her. "Luna Ashford," Alpha Marcus began, his voice measured and careful. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you ever experienced anything unusual? Visions, perhaps? Or moments where you could sense things others could not? Any abilities that manifested in ways other than shifting?" Luna stared at him, completely bewildered. "No, Alpha. I have no abilities at all. That's why I'm Omega. That's why I can't shift." Damien made a sound of disgust, but his father held up a hand to silence him. "I want you to think carefully," Marcus continued. "Your grandmother, Celeste Ashford. She died when you were very young, correct? Do you remember anything she might have told you about your bloodline, about your heritage?" The mention of her grandmother sent a wave of unexpected emotion through Luna. Celeste had been the only person in her childhood who had made her feel loved, who had held her during nightmares and told her stories about the old ways, about times when the packs lived differently. She had died when Luna was 7, and Luna's memories of her were fragmented and dreamlike. But there was something, a moment she had not thought about in years, suddenly rising to the surface of her mind with startling clarity. "She told me I was special," Luna heard herself say, the words emerging as though from a great distance. "She said that I was sleeping, but one day I would wake up. I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was just trying to make me feel better about being different." The two men exchanged a look that Luna could not interpret. Then Alpha Marcus sighed deeply, suddenly looking much older than his 58 years. "Tomorrow night's ceremony is not just a celebration," he said quietly. "It is a reckoning. The elders have discovered prophecies that speak of this specific celestial alignment, texts that have been hidden for centuries. They speak of the Lunar Prima, an ancient bloodline of she-wolves who possessed powers that exceeded even those of the strongest alphas. These wolves could heal with a touch, could communicate directly with the moon goddess, could wield silver as though it were harmless metal. They were revered as sacred, as bridges between the mortal realm and the divine. Luna felt her heart beginning to pound, though she did not yet understand why. "What does this have to do with me?" It was Damien who answered, his voice dripping with barely contained anger. "Because your grandmother was suspected of being the last known Lunar Prima, though it was never confirmed. She appeared powerless for most of her life, just like you. But there were stories, rumors that she had abilities she kept hidden. If the bloodline passes through maternal lines, as the texts suggest, then you might be carrying that legacy. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Luna grabbed the edge of Marcus's desk to steady herself, her mind refusing to process what she was hearing. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm nothing. I can't even shift into a basic wolf form." The text suggests that lunar primas often appeared powerless until a specific trigger event awakened their abilities, Marcus explained, his tone gentler now. And that trigger event is exposure to a blood moon of this particular configuration. Luna, if the prophecy is accurate, tomorrow night when the moon rises, you may transform in ways none of us can predict. The elders wanted to lock you away, to prevent you from attending the ceremony. But I have convinced them that if you truly are a lunar prima, trying to keep you from the moon would be both futile and potentially catastrophic. Luna's legs gave out, and she sank into the chair behind her, without being invited to sit. This could not be real. This had to be some kind of elaborate joke, another way for the pack to torment her before casting her out entirely. But Alpha Marcus was not the kind of man who joked, and the genuine concern in his expression suggested he believed every word he was saying. "I want to be clear about something," Damien interjected, moving to stand directly in front of Luna, using his height to loom over her in a display of dominance that would have made any other wolf bow their head in submission. "If this prophecy is real, if you do have these powers, it changes nothing between us. I rejected you, and that rejection stands. I will not be bound to you regardless of what abilities you might manifest. My father may believe in ancient bloodlines and mystical destinies, but I believe in strength, in wolves who prove their worth through action, not through accidents of birth." The cruelty in his words should have hurt, but Luna found that she felt nothing at all. She had been hollowed out by years of rejection and abuse, and there was simply nothing left inside her for Damien to wound. She looked up at him with eyes that had learned not to hope for anything, and she saw something flicker across his face, something that might have been regret if she had cared enough to interpret it correctly. "Am I dismissed?" she asked Alpha Marcus, ignoring Damien entirely. "I have dishes to finish in the kitchen." Marcus studied her for a long moment, and Luna thought she saw something like respect in his gaze. "You are dismissed. But Luna, I want you to stay close to the pack house tomorrow. Do not wander into the forest alone. There are wolves arriving from other territories who might view a potential lunar prima as either a prize to claim or a threat to eliminate. You will be under pack protection until we understand what is happening." Luna stood, her movements stiff and mechanical, and walked out of the office without looking back. She made it all the way to her small room in the servants' quarters, before the trembling started, before the magnitude of what she had just been told crashed over her like a wave. She sat on her narrow bed, staring at her hands as though expecting them to suddenly glow with mystical power. But they remained exactly as they had always been, small and calloused from years of manual labor, completely ordinary in every way. Sleep did not come easily that night, and when it finally did, Luna's dreams were filled with images of a woman who looked like an older version of herself, standing beneath a crimson moon with her hands raised to the sky, power radiating from her in visible waves of silver light. The woman turned to look at Luna, and her eyes, the same unusual violet shade that Luna saw in her own reflection, held both a warning and a promise. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. The entire pack was focused on the ceremony, decorating the great clearing in the heart of the territory with flowers and candles, preparing the ritual space according to ancient specifications that had been pulled from dusty archives. Luna went about her usual duties, but she could feel eyes on her constantly now, pack members whispering as she passed, some with curiosity, others with undisguised hostility. The elders watched her with particular intensity, their wizened faces impossible to read. As sunset approached, Maya helped Luna into the ceremonial dress that all unmated she-wolves were required to wear for the blood moon gathering. It was simple white linen, designed to allow for quick removal in case shifting became necessary, and it made Luna feel more exposed than any of the servants' uniforms she usually wore. Maya braided Luna's long silver blonde hair, an unusual color that Luna had always hated, because it made her stand out when all she wanted was to disappear, and wove small white flowers through the plats. "Whatever happens tonight," Maya whispered as she worked, "remember that you are stronger than they ever gave you credit for. You survived Damien's rejection. You survived years of their cruelty. You are not powerless, Luna. You never were." The clearing was already packed with wolves when Luna arrived, hundreds of them from dozens of different packs, all gathered in concentric circles around the central ritual space. The unmated wolves stood in the innermost ring, as tradition demanded, with the mated pairs and pack leaders forming the outer circles. Luna found herself standing among she-wolves who towered over her, powerful females from warrior bloodlines who looked at her with barely concealed contempt. She kept her eyes fixed on the stone altar at the center of the clearing, where the pack's elder, priestess, an ancient woman named Morgana, prepared the ritual implements. The sun dipped below the horizon, and for several long minutes, the world was caught in that liminal space between day and night. Then, slowly, the moon began to rise, and it was like nothing Luna had ever seen before. It emerged blood-red, massive and swollen, seeming to take up half the sky. A collective gasp went through the assembled wolves, and Luna felt something stir deep inside her, something that had been sleeping, for a very long time beginning to wake. Priestess Morgana began to chant in the old language, words that Luna should not have understood but somehow did, calling upon the moon goddess to bless her children, to show them her favor, to choose her champion. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with power that made Luna's skin prickle with awareness. Other wolves began to shift, unable to contain their excitement, their wolf forms emerging in ripples of transformation that swept through the crowd. But Luna remained stubbornly human, her body refusing to change as it always had. Then the moon reached its zenith, and the world exploded into light. A beam of pure silver radiance shot down from the crimson moon, so bright that Luna had to shield her eyes, so powerful that the ground itself trembled. The beam swept across the assembled wolves like a searchlight, and Luna watched as it passed over Damien, over his father, over every single powerful alpha and warrior in the clearing. She waited for it to stop, to select one of them as the prophesied champion, already preparing herself for the disappointment of remaining exactly what she had always been. The light touched her, and Luna's entire world shattered and reformed in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Power unlike anything she had ever imagined exploded through her body, burning away the walls and blocks that had contained it for her entire life. She felt her grandmother's presence, a ghostly echo wrapped around her consciousness, and she understood with sudden, terrible clarity that Celeste had bound Luna's powers when she was an infant, had locked away her abilities to protect her from those who would have used or destroyed her. But death had weakened those bindings, and now, under the direct attention of the moon goddess herself, they crumbled entirely. Luna threw her head back and screamed, but the sound that emerged was not entirely human. Her body began to change, but not into a normal wolf form. Silver light poured from her skin, her eyes blazing with violet fire as 22 years of suppressed power erupted all at once. She felt her bones restructuring, felt her senses expanding to encompass things she had never been able to perceive before. She could hear the heartbeat of every wolf in the clearing, could smell their emotions, their fear and awe mixing into an intoxicating cocktail. When the transformation finally completed, Luna looked down at herself and saw that she had shifted into a form that existed in none of the pack histories, a wolf that stood nearly as tall as a horse, her fur the color of moonlight itself, her eyes still blazing with that otherworldly violet glow. The beam of light intensified, and Luna heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and powerful, and undeniably feminine. "Behold my lunar prima, first of her kind to walk this earth in 1,000 years. She is my chosen champion, my voice made flesh, my power given. Form. Those who would lead must first learn to kneel. Those who would command must first learn to serve. Luna Ashford has passed the trials of humility and suffering. Now she rises to claim what has always been hers." The light released her, and Luna collapsed back into her human form, gasping for breath, her body trembling with the aftershocks of transformation. But she was not the same person who had stood in this clearing moments before. She could feel the power thrumming through her veins, vast and terrible, and completely under her control. She pushed herself to her feet, and every wolf in the clearing, Alpha and Omega alike, instinctively dropped to their knees before her. All except one. Damien stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror as he realized what had just happened. The mate he had rejected, the powerless Omega he had publicly humiliated, had just been revealed as the most powerful wolf any of them had ever encountered. Luna looked at him across the kneeling crowd, and she felt the mate bond, damaged but not destroyed by his rejection, still connecting them. But where once it had been a source of pain, now it was simply information, a connection she could examine with detachment. She walked toward him, and the crowd parted before her like water. When she stood directly in front of Damien, she saw fear in his eyes for the first time, and she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no desire for revenge, just a vast emptiness where her feelings for him had once been. "You rejected me because you thought I was weak," she said quietly, her voice carrying to every corner of the clearing despite its softness. "You looked at me and saw nothing worth keeping. You're right that strength matters, Damien. But you never understood what real strength looks like. It isn't the ability to dominate others. It's the ability to survive when everything is taken from you. It's the choice to remain kind when cruelty would be easier. It's getting up every single day when you have nothing left to get up for." She turned away from him, addressing the assembled packs. "I don't know what it means to be a lunar prima. I don't know what the moon goddess wants from me. But I know what I want. I want a world where a wolf's worth isn't determined by their rank or their power. I want packs where omegas are valued, where strength is measured by character rather than dominance. If I have been given these abilities, I will use them to build that world, with or without the approval of the alphas who have spent centuries maintaining systems that benefit only themselves." She felt the power rising in her again, responding to her will, and she raised her hands to the crimson moon. Silver light poured from her palms, spreading out across the clearing in waves that washed over every wolf present. Luna could feel their injuries, their pains both physical and emotional, and without fully understanding how she was doing it, she healed them. Old scars faded, chronic pains vanished, broken bonds between mates who had been separated by pack politics suddenly snapped back into place. She gave and gave until she had nothing left, until the power receded and left her swaying on her feet, exhausted but strangely exhilarated. Let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. Will Luna accept her role as Lunar Prima? Can Damien ever earn her forgiveness? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the continuation of this story. The days that followed the blood moon ceremony passed in a chaotic blur. Luna found herself at the center of a political maelstrom that she had no experience navigating. Alphas from packs across the continent requested meetings, some offering alliances, others thinly veiled threats. The Council of Elders, that shadowy group of ancient wolves who supposedly advised pack leaders but actually wielded enormous behind-the-scenes power, demanded that she appear before them to be evaluated and registered, which Luna's newly awakened instincts told her was code for controlled and contained. She had been moved from her servants' quarters to a guest suite in the main pack house, a room with more space than she had occupied in her entire previous life. Maya had been assigned as her personal attendant, a role reversal that made both of them uncomfortable, and Luna had immediately insisted that Maya stop bowing and calling her titles. They were still figuring out how to be friends when the fundamental power dynamic between them had shifted so dramatically. Luna spent hours each day learning to control her abilities, working with Priestess Morgana, who was the only wolf old enough to remember stories about lunar primas from her own grandmother's tales. The healing came most easily to her, a natural extension of her empathy and desire to help others. She could also sense emotions with startling clarity, could sometimes catch glimpses of thoughts from wolves who were broadcasting particularly strongly. The ability to manipulate silver was perhaps the most unsettling, her hands able to shape the toxic metal as though it were clay, immune to the burning agony it caused normal wolves. But the ability that frightened her most was the power she had over other wolves' transformations. During one training session, she had accidentally forced an entire group of warriors to shift simultaneously, their bodies responding to her will rather than their own. The terror in their eyes as they lost control of their own forms had made Luna physically ill, and she had locked herself in her room for 2 days afterward, terrified of what she might do if she lost control. Damien had attempted to speak with her multiple times, appearing outside her door at odd hours, sending notes through intermediaries, even trying to use his father's authority to command her presence. Luna ignored all of it. She had nothing to say to him, no interest in whatever explanations or apologies he thought he could offer. The mate bond still connected them, but Luna had learned to block it, to wall off that part of herself so completely that Damien's emotions could not reach her. It was Alpha Marcus who finally broke through her isolation, appearing at her door on the 5th morning after the ceremony with a breakfast tray and a grave expression. "We need to talk," he said simply, and something in his tone made Luna step aside and let him enter. They sat at the small table near the window, and Marcus poured tea with the careful precision of someone buying time to organize his thoughts. "The Council of Elders has issued an ultimatum," he finally said. "They want you to appear before them within the week, or they will declare you a rogue threat and authorize your elimination. They claim that an unbound lunar prima with no pack loyalty represents an existential danger to the established order." Luna wrapped her hands around her teacup, feeling its warmth without really registering it. "They want to kill me. Because I don't fit into their hierarchy. Because I threaten their control." "Yes," Marcus agreed bluntly. "The Council has maintained power for centuries by ensuring that strength remains consolidated in the hands of a few powerful alphas who owe them loyalty. A lunar prima, especially one who publicly declared her intention to reform pack structures, represents everything they have worked to prevent. They will not allow you to exist independently." "So what are my options?" Luna asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Marcus met her eyes steadily. "You bind yourself to a pack, accepting an alpha's authority, and thereby placing yourself within the existing power structure. Or you flee, become a rogue, and spend the rest of your life running from hunters. Or you fight, and almost certainly die, because even with your abilities, you cannot stand against the combined might of every pack on the continent. There's a 4th option," Luna said slowly, an idea forming even as she spoke. "I create my own pack. I offer sanctuary to wolves who don't fit into the current system. Omegas, rogues, rejected mates, anyone the traditional packs have cast aside. I build something new." The alpha was quiet for a long moment, and Luna could see him calculating probabilities and political ramifications. "If you do that, you will need territory, resources, and protection during the vulnerable early stages. You will also need at least one wolf of alpha blood to stand with you, to give your pack legitimacy in the eyes of the Council. Without that, they will simply declare you a rogue collective and authorize immediate extermination." Luna felt her heart sink. She knew no alphas who would willingly abandon their positions to join her impossible dream. But before she could voice this objection, Marcus continued, his voice rough with emotion. "My son has made many mistakes. His treatment of you is unforgivable, and I have failed as a father by allowing it to continue. But Damien is not beyond redemption, Luna. He has spent these past days in a state of crisis, forced to confront the reality of what he did to you, what he threw away. He has asked me to relay a message. I don't want to hear anything from him," Luna said flatly. "You need to hear this," Marcus insisted. "Damien is willing to step down as future alpha of Silvermoon. He's willing to join your pack, to provide the alpha blood you need for legitimacy, and to accept whatever role you deem appropriate. For him, he asks nothing in return except the chance to prove that he can be better than the wolf who rejected you." Luna stared at the older man, certain she had misheard. He would give up everything? His position, his pack, his future as alpha? Why would he do that? Marcus smiled sadly, because he has finally realized that everything he thought mattered, all the power and status and control, means nothing if he becomes the kind of leader who destroys something precious, because it doesn't fit his narrow vision of strength. And perhaps because the mate bond, even damaged, still connects you, and he cannot bear the thought of you facing the council's wrath while he does nothing. The offer was so unexpected that Luna could not process it. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately, to tell Damien that he could keep his grand gestures and his guilty conscience. But another part, the strategic part that had awakened along with her lunar prima powers, recognized the opportunity. With Damien's support, her pack would have legitimacy. With his combat skills and tactical knowledge, they would have protection. And perhaps most importantly, his defection would send a message to other wolves that change was possible, that the old hierarchies could be challenged. "I need to think about this," Luna finally said. "And if I agree, Damien needs to understand that this is not a path to reconciliation. I am not doing this to give him a chance to win me back. The mate bond between us is broken in every way that matters, and it will remain that way." Marcus nodded slowly. "I will convey your message. But Luna, I will tell you something as a father who loves his son despite his failures. Damien does not expect your forgiveness. He does not expect anything from you, except the opportunity to do the right thing. Finally, after doing so many wrong things, sometimes redemption is not about getting back what you lost. It's about becoming someone worthy of standing in the presence of what you destroyed, even if you can never possess it again." After Marcus left, Luna stood at her window, looking out over the Silver Moon territory. In the distance, she could see wolves going about their daily routines, warriors training, children playing. The complex ecosystem of pack life, functioning as it had for generations. Most of those wolves would never question the system they lived in, never wonder if there might be a better way. They were comfortable in their assigned roles. Even the Omegas who suffered under the hierarchy because at least they knew their place. But Luna had lived at the very bottom of that hierarchy, had experienced its cruelties firsthand, and she could not unsee what she now knew. She thought about all the wolves like her, the ones deemed powerless or worthless, cast aside because they did not fit the narrow definitions of value that the packs recognized. She thought about Maya, who was brilliant and kind, but would never rise above servant status because she lacked warrior bloodlines. She thought about the rejected mates she had heard whispers of, wolves driven to madness or suicide because the bond they could not control had been severed by partners who valued status over love. She made her decision. 3 days later, Luna stood before the Council of Elders in their ancient meeting hall, a vast underground chamber lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on walls covered in centuries of pack histories carved into stone. The council consisted of 12 wolves, 6 male and 6 female, all of them ancient enough to have witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of alpha bloodlines. They sat in a semicircle on elevated thrones, looking down at Luna with expressions ranging from barely concealed hostility to clinical curiosity. Beside Luna stood Damien, and if the council was surprised to see the future alpha of Silvermoon in a position of support rather than authority, they hid it well. Damien had sworn a formal oath to Luna the previous evening, binding himself to her service in front of witnesses, effectively ending his claim to the Silvermoon alpha position. His father had accepted the decision with grace, naming his younger son, Gentle Derek, who had always been more interested in healing than fighting, as his new heir. The pack had been shocked, but Marcus had made it clear that any wolf who wished to join Luna's new pack would be allowed to leave with his blessing. Luna Ashford, the eldest of the council members, intoned, her voice crackling with age and power. "You stand before us claiming the right to establish a new pack. This is a privilege rarely granted, and never to one so young, so inexperienced. Tell us why we should permit this." Luna had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times, but now that it was here, she found that the words she had prepared felt hollow. Instead, she spoke from her heart. "I stand before you, not claiming a right, but asserting a truth. The moon goddess herself chose me, blessed me, gave me abilities that you cannot control or contain. You can try to force me into existing structures, but we all know that will fail. I am too powerful to be controlled by normal pack hierarchies, and trying to bind me will only create the exact conflict you seek to avoid. So I offer you an alternative. Allow me to create a sanctuary pack, a place for wolves who do not fit elsewhere. Give me territory, the wasteland border regions that no pack currently wants, and I will turn them into something valuable. In exchange, I will maintain peace, honor the treaties between packs, and pose no threat to the established order. You publicly declared your intention to reform pack structures, another council member challenged. That sounds very much like a threat to the established order. I declared my intention to build something new, Luna corrected. I never said I would destroy what currently exists. Let the traditional packs continue as they always have, but give wolves a choice. Let those who are suffering in systems that do not value them come to a place where different rules apply. If the traditional packs are as strong and functional as you claim, then my sanctuary pack will attract only those wolves you did not want anyway. And if I succeed in building something better, then perhaps that success will inspire change without requiring conflict. The council members conferred among themselves in whispers too quiet for even Luna's enhanced hearing to catch. She stood straight and calm, channeling the dignity her grandmother had always tried to teach her, refusing to show the fear that churned in her stomach. Beside her, Damien remained perfectly still, his warrior's discipline evident in every line of his body. Finally, the eldest council member spoke again. We will grant your request, but with conditions. You will be given the Hollow Territories, 300 square miles of mountainous wasteland on the northwestern border. You will have 1 year to establish a functioning pack of at least 50 wolves. You will submit to annual inspections to ensure you are maintaining the peace, and you will accept a council observer, a wolf who will live among your pack and report on your activities. These terms are non-negotiable. Luna wanted to argue, wanted to reject the idea of a spy embedded in her pack, but she could see the calculation in the council members' eyes. They were offering her enough rope to hang herself, confident that she would fail, and that her failure would serve as an object lesson to any other wolves who might dream of challenging the status quo. Very well. She would take their rope and weave it into something they never expected. I accept your terms, she said clearly. Thank you for this opportunity. The Hollow Territories were even worse than Luna had imagined. The land was rocky and barren, the soil too poor for farming, the game too scarce for easy hunting. A few abandoned structures dotted the landscape, remnants of a pack that had occupied this territory decades ago, before being wiped out by a plague. It would take enormous work to make this place habitable, let alone desirable. But Luna looked at the desolation and saw potential. She stood on a high ridge with Damien, Maya, and the 32 wolves who had chosen to follow her from Silvermoon and other nearby packs. And she raised her hands to the sky. Silver light poured from her palms, spreading out across the barren land. She could not create food from nothing, or make trees grow overnight, but she could do something almost as valuable. She could heal the land itself, could purify the soil that had been poisoned by the plague, could call water up from deep underground springs and guide it into streams and pools. The transformation took 3 days and nights of continuous effort, leaving Luna so exhausted that she collapsed and slept for 14 hours straight. But when she woke, the Hollow Territories had become something new. Water flowed where there had been dust. Green shoots pushed up through soil that had learned to nurture life again. It would still take time, still require hard work, but it was no longer a death sentence. They built their pack slowly, carefully. Damien used his tactical knowledge to organize defenses and hunting parties. Maya revealed an unexpected talent for administration, keeping track of supplies and schedules with meticulous efficiency. One by one, wolves began to arrive, drawn by rumors of a pack where omegas were valued, where rejected mates found healing, where strength was measured by character rather than dominance. Not everyone who came was easy to integrate. There was Zara, a former warrior who had been exiled from her pack for refusing a forced mating. She was angry and distrustful, constantly testing boundaries and challenging authority. There was Thomas, a young wolf who had never shifted, much like Luna had been, who arrived half-starved and terrified. There was Elena, a healer who had been dismissed from her pack for being too old to continue working, despite her vast knowledge and steady hands. Luna met with each new arrival personally, listening to their stories, learning what had broken them and what they hoped to build. She established new rules for the pack, codifying protections for omegas, banning forced matings, creating councils where all wolves, regardless of rank, could voice concerns. Some traditions she kept: the full moon gatherings, the coming-of-age ceremonies, the hunt rituals that connected wolves to their primal nature. But she stripped away the cruelties, the dominance displays that served only to humiliate, the rigid hierarchies that valued birth over merit. And slowly, impossibly, it began to work. The council's observer, a stern she-wolf named Cassandra, arrived expecting to document failure. Instead, she found herself watching a functioning community emerge from nothing. Luna caught Cassandra making notes with an expression that might have been grudging respect, and she allowed herself to hope that perhaps they might actually survive this experiment. Her relationship with Damien remained complicated. He had proven himself invaluable to the pack, working harder than anyone, never pulling rank or demanding special treatment. He trained the warriors, yes, but he also helped build shelters, hauled water, did whatever needed doing without complaint. Luna watched him transform from the arrogant future alpha, who had rejected her, into someone quieter, more thoughtful, more genuinely strong. They worked together constantly, their partnership essential to the pack's success, but Luna kept emotional walls firmly in place. The mate bond still connected them, and she could feel Damien's emotions bleeding through sometimes, his regret and longing and determination. But she refused to acknowledge it, refused to let herself soften toward him. Trust, once broken as thoroughly as he had broken hers, could not be easily rebuilt. 6 months into their experiment, disaster struck. A neighboring pack, the Bloodfang Alliance led by the ruthless Alpha Constantine, decided that the Hollow Territories would make an excellent expansion for his own lands. He arrived with 60 warriors, surrounding Luna's settlement under cover of darkness, clearly planning to simply slaughter everyone and claim the now valuable territory. Luna felt them coming, her enhanced senses picking up their approach long before they struck. She roused the pack, organized defenses, but she knew they were vastly outnumbered. Most of her wolves were not warriors. They were healers, builders, refugees who had come seeking peace, not conflict. She stood at the front of her small defensive line, Damien beside her, and prepared to fight what she expected to be her last battle. Alpha Constantine strode forward, confident and smirking. "The council's little experiment ends tonight," he announced. "You've done excellent work here, making this wasteland valuable again. I thank you for your service. Now surrender, and I'll grant you quick deaths." Luna felt rage building inside her, hot and fierce, but she forced it down. Anger would not save her people. She needed to be smarter. "The council authorized this territory for our use," she called back. "Attacking us violates their decree." Constantine laughed. "The council isn't here, and by the time they hear about this, you'll be dead, and my pack will be settled in. They'll grumble and fine me, perhaps, but they won't force me to abandon valuable territory. That's not how the world works, little Luna." He was right, and Luna knew it. The council cared about maintaining order, not about justice. They would not go to war with an established pack over the destruction of her experimental sanctuary. She looked at the wolves depending on her, saw their fear and their faith, and made a decision that would either save them or doom them all. She stepped forward, away from her defensive line, and let her lunar prima power flow through her completely, holding nothing back. Silver light blazed from her skin, and her eyes became twin violet suns. "I am Luna Ashford, chosen champion of the moon goddess, lunar prima, and alpha of the sanctuary pack. You threaten my wolves, and I will not allow that." Constantine shifted into his massive wolf form, a scarred brute that spoke of countless victories. His warriors followed suit, 60 enormous wolves against Luna's 32. But Luna did not shift. Instead, she raised her hands and called upon the ability she had been most afraid of, the power over other wolves' transformations. She felt her consciousness expand, touching each of Constantine's warriors, and with a thought, She forced them back into their human forms. 60 warriors suddenly found themselves naked and vulnerable, their wolf sides locked away by her will. The shock and terror in their eyes was absolute. Luna held them there, demonstrating power. That should not have been possible, showing Constantine exactly what he had chosen to attack. "You can try to kill me," Luna said quietly, her voice carrying to every wolf present. "But first you will watch every single one of your warriors die, because I will hold them in their human forms while my pack destroys them. Or you can leave now, and spread the word that the sanctuary pack is under my protection, and I do not show mercy to those who threaten my wolves." For a long moment, Constantine stood frozen, clearly warring with himself. Then, slowly, he shifted back to human form and raised his hands in surrender. "We're leaving," he said hoarsely. "This was a mistake." Luna released his warriors, and they scrambled back, some of them whimpering with relief. Constantine gathered them quickly and retreated, and Luna watched until they were completely gone before allowing herself to collapse. Damien caught her before she hit the ground, and she was too exhausted to push him away as he carried her back to her quarters. News of the confrontation spread rapidly through the pack networks. The sanctuary pack, the experiment everyone expected to fail, had faced down a superior force through the sheer power of their lunar prima alpha. Wolves began arriving in greater numbers, drawn by the promise of protection and purpose. Within 2 months, Luna's pack had grown to 78 members, exceeding the Council's requirement with 4 months to spare. The Council's inspection came on. The anniversary of the pack's founding. The 12 elders walked through the settlement, noting the sturdy buildings, the well-organized patrols, the thriving gardens, the training grounds where warriors sparred alongside healers learning self-defense. They interviewed pack members at random, and Luna held her breath, hoping her wolves would represent the pack well. But she need not have worried. Her pack members spoke with genuine enthusiasm about their lives, about feeling valued and safe for the first time. Even Cassandra, the council observer, provided a report that, while carefully neutral in tone, detailed the pack's successes in maintaining order, resolving disputes fairly, and contributing to the broader pack community through the healing services Luna provided to neighboring territories. The council had no choice but to officially recognize the sanctuary pack as legitimate. Luna stood before them again, this time with 78 wolves at her back, and accepted the formal declaration that secured her pack's future. She saw frustration in some of the elders' faces, satisfaction in others. They had expected her to fail, had perhaps wanted her to fail, but she had beaten their impossible conditions through sheer determination and the loyalty of wolves who believed in her vision. As the seasons passed, the sanctuary pack became something unique in the supernatural world. Word spread of a place where Omega wolves could rise to positions of influence based on their skills rather than their bloodlines, where rejected mates found healing and sometimes even new bonds, where different was celebrated rather than punished. Other packs began, slowly and reluctantly, to examine their own practices, pressured by pack members who had heard about the sanctuary and wondered why their own leaders could not provide similar protections. Luna's relationship with Damien evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. They were not mates, not in the traditional sense. The bond between them remained damaged, a broken thing that neither of them attempted to repair, but they became something else. Partners who understood each other with a depth that went beyond words. Friends who had learned to trust through shared struggle. Damien had earned his place in the pack through consistent action, through years of proving that his rejection had been the act of an immature, frightened boy, and that he had grown into someone capable of genuine selflessness. 1 evening. 3 years after the pack's founding, Luna and Damien sat together on the ridge where she had first healed the hollow territories. The land below them was transformed, lush and green, dotted with homes and fields and wolves living lives of dignity and purpose. "Do you ever regret it?" Damien asked quietly. "Choosing this instead of a normal life in an established pack?" Luna considered the question carefully. "I never had the option of a normal life," she finally said. "I was always going to be either the Powerless Omega or the Lunar Prima. There was no middle ground for someone like me. But if I could go back and change things, If I could have been born into a normal life with normal powers, I don't think I would take that trade. Everything I suffered, all the years of humiliation and pain, they taught me empathy. They showed me what was wrong with our world, and now I get to build something better. And us? Damien asked, and Luna heard the vulnerability in his voice. Is there ever going to be an us? Or have I destroyed that possibility forever? Luna turned to look at him. Really look at him, seeing the man he had become rather than the boy who had wounded her so deeply. I don't know, she admitted. The mate bond is still there. I can feel it. But I can't forget what you did, Damien. I can't pretend it didn't happen. You didn't just reject me as a mate. You rejected me as a person, told me I was worthless, and you did it publicly to humiliate me as thoroughly as possible. That's not something I can simply forgive, because you've spent a few years doing the right thing. I know, Damien said softly, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for another chance. I just want you to know that rejecting you was the biggest mistake of my life, and I will spend the rest of my existence trying to be worthy of standing beside you, even if it's only as your friend and packmate. They sat in silence as the sun set, two wolves who had been broken and remade, who had found purpose in building something that had never existed before. The mate bond hummed quietly between them, neither accepted nor completely rejected. A question that remained unanswered, because perhaps some questions did not need immediate answers. Luna thought about her grandmother Celeste, wondered if the old woman had known what Luna would become, if the binding she had placed had been meant to protect not just Luna's life, but her empathy, ensuring that when power finally came, it would be wielded by someone who understood suffering. She liked to think that Celeste would be proud of what the Sanctuary Pack had become, proud that her granddaughter had taken the cruelty of the wolf world and transformed it into something kinder. As full darkness fell and the moon rose silver and beautiful over the hollow territories that were hollow no longer, Luna stood and stretched. There was work to be done tomorrow, disputes to mediate, new arrivals to welcome, training sessions to supervise. The work of building a better world was never finished, but that was exactly as it should be. Change was not a destination, but a journey, and Luna had miles yet to travel. She looked at Damien, saw him watching her with that mix of regret and admiration that had become familiar, and felt something shift inside her, just slightly. Perhaps one day, years from now, when he had proven himself not for months but for decades, when the wounds he had inflicted had finally scarred over completely. Perhaps then she might revisit the question of what they could be to each other. But that day was not today, and she was content to let it remain a distant possibility, rather than a pressing concern. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment letting me know your thoughts about Luna's journey, and whether you think she should eventually forgive Damien. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more supernatural romance stories. Your support helps us create more content like this. The Sanctuary Pack's influence continued to grow, becoming a symbol of hope for wolves across the continent, proving that strength could be measured in compassion rather than dominance. That power used to uplift rather than control could transform the world in ways that force never could. And at the center of it all stood Luna Ashford, the wolf without a wolf who had become the most powerful alpha of her generation, chosen by the moon goddess, not in spite of her suffering, but because of what that suffering had taught her about the true meaning of strength.